emissions are projected to drop by 8% this year because of the coronavirus pandemic. That's according to a new report by the International Energy Agency. But as a recent story in the New York Times explains, it's not all necessarily good news. As major economies scramble to reopen, emissions are likely going to soar again and possibly eclipse the world's previous rates of pollution. We are joined now by Shweta Chakraborty. She's a risk and behavioral scientist with the EcoHealth Alliance Leadership Council, and she joins us via Skype from Washington, D.C. Thank you. An 8% drop for 2020. Can you put this into perspective for us? And what's the likelihood that the rebound could potentially be worse for the environment?
Yes, absolutely. So despite the increasing global awareness that we need to really mitigate and adapt to climate change, we are still increasing every year in carbon emissions. So it wasn't a good story leading up to this year, 2020, when COVID-19 hit. Now we're going to see a decrease by the end of this year globally of 6%. For America, that's a 16-year low. That's good news, but that's a dent in the trajectory of the planet warming, which we are still on track for reaching 1.5 degrees Celsius by mid-century. Remember, we're not meant to go past 1.5 degrees Celsius, period, by the end of the century. So the fact that we are still on this track towards reaching that means that this COVID-19 outbreak did nothing except make a dent in it. It's almost as if you just stopped smoking a pack of cigarettes, even though you smoke cigarettes every single day, and hope that because of that, you're not going to get lung cancer. It's a similar analogy to the track we're on in terms of global warming. So we learned a lot from this in terms of what we can potentially do with energy consumption and what needs to happen to get carbon emissions reduced at a global scale. But that doesn't mean this in particular is going to get us off that trajectory.
Right. I know that the UN said that we would need to reduce our global emissions every year by 8% between now and 2030. And so it looks like on pace to do that for this year, but with a global pandemic and hopefully a situation that we are not going to repeat every year from here on out. The report from the International Energy Agency also noted that after past crises, that global emissions, according to the New York Times, have typically shot back up to previous levels once the initial shock passed. And we already know that China is getting back on board. They are the world's biggest consumer of coal energy. So what is the chance that as nations are now starting to try and come back online with economies that have really been damaged by the pandemic, that global emissions might actually increase? Is that a possibility?
That is historically what we've seen. So we know that there was a downtick in emissions following the 2008 financial crisis, but any reduction in emissions was offset by the increased carbon emissions the following year because all of the recovery and stimulus packages did not prioritize renewables. It still prioritized the cement industry and existing fossil fuel industries. And that's what's different. And that's the good news is now we are actually seeing renewable energies doing better than any other energy contributor, mainly because of how far we've come since 2008. It still doesn't have enough of a market share, and that's ultimately what the issue is going to be. But this is an opportunity to give that incentive to get renewable energies as part of that portfolio as we think about what governments can do to really include a more sustainable future as part of their long-term recovery plan. So incentivizing renewable sector, making sure that resilient infrastructure is in place, ensuring that there is efficiencies in there, that there are emphasis on battery and storage capacity for these types of renewables, including that as part of the recovery portfolio is really the unique difference that we have now in the time that's passed since the last disasters that we experienced globally.
So you say that it's an opportunity. Do you see actually any indication that governments are incentivizing green energy as part of their recovery plans and stimulus plans?
So we're seeing generally because renewables are doing better than any of the other sources of energy, the reason for that is because so many countries around the world have prioritized renewables going into the grid over other fossil fuels. That's something that the United States is really behind.